I'll start with I'm Ryan St. Germaine. Very, very glad to be here, and it's pretty easy to be grateful today with the sunny weather that we're having out in Vancouver. It's absolutely gorgeous. Got in a little workout this morning too, so got to get outside, and very proud to be on this territory, the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And it is an honor to be here. My family is from I'm settler on my mom's side from England and from Doukhobor from Russia, and then a proud Métis on my dad's side, family originally from Red River, and more recently from around the Fort Capel area. And yeah, so this is a pretty exciting panel that we have today. But before, we were chatting about this beforehand, that we tend to move from Zoom call to Zoom call. And so let's just take a moment. I know I could use one. Let's just take a quick deep breath, maybe feel our toes on the ground, and just take a moment to come back to being here. I think I'm actually okay. I'm ready to roll now, guys. I think we're ready to go. Okay. But I forget we're recording this. I'm gonna have to listen to this afterwards, guys. I'm very excited to be here with our panelists today, and Bradley from New Ventures BC. Bradley, do you want to maybe just intro the program real quick, and then we'll do an intro with everybody, and we'll get started.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Bradley. I'm from New Ventures BC. I'm the education program manager here. Yeah, really excited to be here. I've been working with Ryan on the Indigenous Tech Founders Program. We just had our first cohort wrap up quite recently, and we're looking forward to our next one in the fall. If you have any questions about that, I'll leave my email address in the chat. I'll type that in there once I'm done talking, and feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. But yeah, very happy to be here. Welcome. I'll hand it back to Ryan.
And Bradley's probably going to kill me on this one, but he's also a very talented stand-up comedian. And so if you get a chance, check out some of his work. He cracks me up no end. So to carry on with the New Ventures programming, we also are going to have a couple of other sessions that we're going to be doing. One of them is going to be on resiliency for leadership with my friend Andrew Mickey, who's a clinical psych and founder of a company called Starling Minds. We are looking at a one for venture ready as well too. So stay tuned. There's going to be some more programming, and I see this non-dilutive one as a beginning as well too. We're going to be adding to the Slack channel different content, curating a lot of this information you see today, and also inviting in some industry partners that have expertise onto that specific channel. So if you have any questions or follow-up, stay tuned and feel free to reach out to me. With that, we have an amazing panel today, and I think I'll just do a little bit of popcorn with the panelists here, because we don't, normally in a panel we know who's beside each other. to my right is Candice Loring, and so Candice, if you maybe just want to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your experience with funding and such.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Candice Loring. My traditional name is Gwala Nakwala, which means I'm a resourceful, hardworking educator. And Nakwala is after my sixth grandfather, Grand Chief Nakwala, of which the Nicola Valley Lakes and River were named after. And I'm calling in today from the beautiful unceded ancestral traditional territory of and I want to say Seal Okanagan because I live in West Bank, but I'm actually at the office in Vancouver today. So of the Coast Salish people, and what an honor it is to be here as a guest on this beautiful territory. And we're in for some good weather this week, in town for Missy Elliott and work, play and fun. So excited for that. In my role, I'm an adjunct professor in the Faculty of Management at UBC Okanagan, and I'm also the Director of Indigenous Relations and initiatives at Genome BC. So I work to advance the national Indigenous innovation ecosystem through collaborative innovation projects. And I've been 5 years in this space. So I spent 4 years at MyTax. I created their National Indigenous Peoples Strategy, the Indigenous Pathways Program, as well as a 3-year Inclusive Innovation Action Plan that contextualizes advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion along reconciliation through incremental systemic changes within an organization. So I'm a disruptor. I love going into non-Indigenous spaces and creating space and place. And I really believe I work on behalf of community in non-Indigenous spaces so that I can ensure that there's a voice for Indigenous people. And I'm a recovering banker. So I love talking finance and funding, but now I prefer talking about how to get money that you don't have to pay back.
Who you gonna tag in?
I'll take in Alejandro.
Oh, thank you, Candice. Tlen, King Alejandro. Hello, my name is Alejandro. I'm the executive director and founder of the Indigenous Friends Association, the IFA. We work with a lot of First Nations and Métis communities across the country in order to deliver digital literacy programs with a lot of Indigenous members and how they can get into the tech sector. We partner with a lot of different corporates and organizations in order to hire our mentees. And we have been very successful to place dozens of those mentees in several of these organizations. We do also a lot of research programs around trying to understand what are the barriers for a lot of Indigenous members to get into the tech sector. I'm originally from the southern part of Turtle Island, from the tail of Turtle Island. What is called my ancestry is from the state of Oaxaca in the southern part of Mexico. My family came from the Mixtec that are in the southern part. And I live as an invited guest in Treaty 13, Toronto, Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, and Huron-Wendat territory. As part of my geeks, I did a PhD in reconciling a lot of Indigenous knowledge and software development. So how traditional knowledge can actually inform the creation of technology in a more ethical way. That now, of course, with the trend of AI, now a lot of people are understanding the importance of being more ethical with the creation of tech and how it's so important to respect Indigenous data sovereignty. So that's a bit of my geek. And also officially, I'm also announcing in October 1st, I'm gonna start being the executive director of this international organization called Access Now. That is working about digital rights at the global level. So now part of the agenda is going to be to bring Indigenous rights to digital rights and how that can be phrased at the global level. So that's a little bit of my gigs. And of course, funding has been part of the core of all this work. So very glad to be here with all of you. I'll pass it to Denis.
Thank you, Alejandro. How's everyone? My name is Denis Carignan, or si vous parlez le français, je m'appelle Denis Carignan. I speak 2 languages, but I don't speak my mother's mother tongue, which is Cree or Soto, and something that is my next language to tackle. I'm talking to you today from Treaty 4 territory, just south and east of Regina, Saskatchewan. I'm from a member of the Pasqua First Nation, which is about half an hour north of where I am right now. And we're a Cree Soto Nation in the southern part of Saskatchewan. I am a president and co-founder of a technology services company called Plato. We're a 28-year-old company founded in 1997 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. The company operated for the first 19 years as a non-Indigenous technology services company, originally created to essentially generate jobs for the province of New Brunswick, and to go out using the knowledge economy and the fact that work is portable, and to help with sort of the labor market in New Brunswick. I met the original founder of that company in 2015, and we had an idea to use the blueprint for the company that he'd created and see if we could make an impact for our own communities in creating a technology workforce with Indigenous Canadians across Canada. I joined in 2016 and we made it through COVID, grew a lot in COVID, and now since January 2022, we are a majority Indigenous owned IT services company with about 400 employees across Canada. About 1/3 of our employees, or just around 140 employees, are First Nation, Métis, or Inuit Canadians. And we've developed a training program, kind of a train and employ program, if you will, based on an apprenticeship model. So we offer a college accredited training program. We invite folks from a specific geographic area who are interested in pursuing a career in technology into our program. 5 months in class. At the end of
Can
the
everyone hear?
sorry?
Yeah.
Everyone who passes the class, we guarantee a full-time permanent job with our company as one of our technology consultants. We specialize in software testing, but we're branching into other technology skill sets, kind of agile skill sets related to business analysis, product analysis, Scrum Masters, things like that. Trying to build professional career opportunities for our own employees and working with other companies to help them develop Indigenous talent if they're able. As far as funding goes, we've accessed non-dilutive funding across Canada to pay for training, but also to help with the expansion of our company into new geographic areas. So I guess we'll get into that as we go. Hi, great to meet everybody.
That was timed very well because I was sitting here looking very confused. I've had to change to my other mic or headset because I could not hear anybody anymore. So okay, everyone can hear me. I can hear everybody again. We're in good shape. I think I'm going to start off with the elephant. I'm gonna start with the elephant. It's not always easy to get funding. Especially early on. It's sometimes complex if you're new coming into it. So maybe I'll start with like, can you maybe share a little bit about the common challenges that you see when applying for non-dilutive funding, just in general terms, but then also maybe, you know, specifically to Indigenous peoples and how they can overcome them.
Would you like to go first, Ryan?
Denny, let's go. Let's start with you.
All right. So I've had a fair bit of experience with this. We did create a startup services company in Saskatchewan. It was called Plato SaaS Tech Testing. Not a really original name, but it worked for the time. It was interesting because we created a company which was majority Indigenous owned. It was owned by a development corporation, which itself had 11 communities as part of their limited partnership. So essentially 11 First Nations represented the majority ownership of that company. Company was situated on a reserve, and the minority owner was Plato, which was non-Indigenous at that time. We are a technology services company, so we specialize in providing specialized services to large corporations, government departments, things like that. We were able to demonstrate that we had a sound revenue source. I think the first year we were somewhere north of $1.5 million of contract revenue. The contracts were with Crown corporations, private corporations, with government departments, so pretty solid contracts. And one of the things about our business is that we have kind of a lumpy cash flow, right? So we have periods of the year where revenue doesn't come in because of holidays in the summer or even around Christmas holiday, Christmas break. We'll have a large bench of resources that we're paying, but we're not necessarily generating revenue to meet that payroll. So there's a need to have a bit of a buffer in the form of a line of credit in order to make sure that statutory requirements of paying people. As a former public servant, one of the things that I realized becoming an entrepreneur is that bi-weekly pay periods come every 2 weeks, and you have to be able to pay people. So the challenge we had was that I couldn't find a bank that would lend money to us for a couple of reasons. There was no security. We were situated on a reserve. We were a services company, so we didn't have a whole lot of assets. We maybe had, I don't know, about $7,000 or $8,000 worth of computers and networking stuff. Or it was not a large amount, and so there was really nothing for them to kind of latch on to. So the only option I was given was to go and get a co-signed, basically guarantee from all of the owners of the company, which fairly complicated when we had 11 First Nations, which were part of the ownership, and probably half of them didn't even know that they had owned this company. So we ended up having to work on an arrangement with our company, with Plato. Fortunately, we were big enough that we were able to use our resources to finance the operations of that small company. But it was something that was always going to be in the way. It was a barrier to the growth of the small company that we had created. Originally, the idea was we were going to create a franchise of Indigenous owned companies across Canada and use sort of the mothership as sort of the backbone to ensure that all the sort of the corporate things, sales, IT, finance, all that stuff was covered for everybody. But in the business that we're in, we do work with large corporations, and one of the things that makes us competitive is scale. And it was difficult to scale across Canada with a bunch of individual privately owned businesses, because if we have specialized work employees in one part of Canada, we may need those resources to work in another part of Canada on a client there, and it was just complicated. So what we ended up doing is buying out that small company, and a bit of a success story there in many ways, because in the 2 years that small company, Plato SaaS Testing, was in operations, At the end of it all, we did an M&A on it, and the value of the company was $1.2 million. So the company that I'm co-owner of ended up buying another company that I created from a business plan right through to getting it operational. The proceeds for that sale of our share of it, that purchase was $1 million. That went to the coffers of 11 First Nations to help with their their economic development needs. So, and at the same time, we'd created about 20 jobs for our community members in the province where I live in Saskatchewan. But the lesson learned for me was that it's very complicated, especially if you're on reserve, especially if you don't have a lot of assets. You do need a sound business plan. You do need to know your market. You do need to know how you generate revenue. You need to understand what your in sources are, what your expenditures are. And you need to have that with such level of confidence that you can explain that with confidence to the banker or whoever the finance person is. With that company, we were able to access money through a group called the Saskatchewan Indian Equity Foundation, which was an Indigenous capital company. And as I found out afterwards, our business was so new and unique that they didn't really know how to value it. They didn't know quite how to assess whether it was a sound business opportunity or not. So they themselves actually sought some advice from somebody who had knowledge of our business, and we were able to access some funding from them, which was really helpful, really for extending the runway. It was we had to make the money, expend the money, but we got a reimbursement after the fact. So it was helpful in terms of keeping things open, especially at the start of the first couple of months. But the key there was that it was a reimbursement, and a lot of government funding that you get in order to manage their risk, they will look to reimburse eligible expenditures, which means that you have to have some sort of upfront financing, or else somebody who's got deep pockets, or you have to fund it yourself in terms of making sure that your business is operating. So it's doable. It's complicated though, and you've got to know your business, and you got to manage it every day, because like I said, bi-weekly pay comes every 2 weeks. And I'll stop there.
Candice, do you want to jump in?
Happy to jump in. I put my old banker hat on with this. Talk to an account manager, small business banking. Don't be afraid to go in and have a conversation. They're getting paid regardless. And so often I would have clients come in and they thought that they needed to wait till they had the business plan, they had everything in place. They would sit down in my office and try and pitch me this business. The passion was clear. There's no calculation for passion when I was debt servicing. That didn't exist. It was all about numbers. And so it's good to know what the bankers are looking for. And it was always the 3 C's of credit. We had capacity, which really looks at the cash flow of the organization, collateral being a big one. What collateral do you have that we could put up? So if you default on this loan, the bank is able to get their funding back. And character looks at that beacon score, right? Do you know what your credit score is? Do you have something in collections? And so often what I found was people destroying their credit based on the most ridiculous couple $100 bill, but out of principle, they didn't want to pay for a phone bill because Rogers or whatever company, sorry, I don't mean to name companies, but some company had upset them and they weren't going to pay their bill. You think these big companies really care about the $300 bill? They're going to write that off, but people are ruining their credit for the most ridiculous reasons. Your credit score, it matters. So don't be afraid to go in, have a conversation, take a look at your credit, find out where you sit financially, is definitely always good. When I was an account manager, I could do up to $50,000 in lending, and that was just based off beacon score, no collateral. Once it would go over 50,000, then I would be looking at collateral. But the economic unfreedoms that exist as Indigenous people who live on reserve is still a challenge. So if you own a home on reserve, not all reserves are the same, but most on reserve, if I was in my community, I could not use my house as collateral to pull equity from to be able to start a business. And that's because it's still seen as it's property of the crown. It's not something that the bank could come in and take away from me. And I think that there's this perception always, and I don't mean to, to say, oh, banks are all just great and wonderful. They're definitely making a lot of money, but there is a fiduciary responsibility. The money that you are receiving when you get a loan is on the other side, that's money in. So the money in funds the money out. And when I say money in, I'm talking about the mom that's saving up for retirement, anyone who invests for their future, and that money is put away in a bank. On the back end of that money is being used to fund the money out. So if they're making poor business investments when it comes to a business loan, it means that they're losing other people's money. So there is a responsibility with that. But then there's a lot of other funding opportunities. So don't just stop at the bank. Look at other sources of funding. I mentioned that I used to work for MyTax. I work for Genome BC now. I'm also work with a lot of other funders. I'm on different project selection committees, and there's a lot of not-for-profit organizations out there whose specific role is to support, whether it be the innovation continuum, but really at the end of the day, it's about growing the GDP, Canada's gross domestic products. When I worked for MyTax, we could do $15,000 internships, fund up to 75% of it, and it was non-competitive, rolling deadlines with over 97% success rate. So there are definitely funding opportunities out there that can support in different ways, but they don't all fit together like a perfect puzzle. So it takes a lot of work on behalf of the entrepreneur to understand what that national innovation ecosystem looks like, all the way up to IRAP and into commercialization. But you can sit down with an ISED senior advisor. So they are trained to teach you about all of the different funding opportunities that exist within the landscape, because it's messy. Even being a funder, I'm looking around trying to figure out, how do we map the national ecosystem and how much of that is overlapping, because we don't want to compete with each other. We want to complement each other and more holistically support businesses along those innovation ecosystems. But I'd say it starts with a conversation. Don't be afraid to go in, start with a banker, ask to set up an appointment with a business banker, find out what the loans look like. What do you need to get a loan? What are they looking for? A lot of acronyms being mentioned. Absolutely. I'm so sorry. I live in this space and I try not to use acronyms. But some of them I forget. I said is like innovation, science, engineering. What is it? I should know. It's where all of our funding comes from as funders. But there's lots of opportunities. Start with a question and you'd be surprised how many doors open up for you. Incubators are there to help you succeed, and they help connect you to so many funding resources. Look at this teamwork. I'll leave it there because I could talk a while about the economic unfreedoms. But it also means that we just have to get a little bit more creative as Indigenous people. If you can't use your house for leverage under NACA, there's 52 Indigenous financial institutions, and that number's growing. That might not even be accurate today.
Danny, you want to add something?
I was just going to add, yeah, I'm starting to see some good news from some of the banks. I sit on an advisory committee for one of the big banks, and I described my challenge with the Plato SAS experience about the inability to go and access operating capital. And I won't claim credit for this, but there's obviously somebody was listening when I was belly aching, because they've introduced a new program at BMO, and I'm sure that there are other institutions that do this, where they will offer basically security-free credit up to $150,000 in terms of an operating line of credit. They have some requirements. It has to be 50% plus Indigenous owned, annual revenue of less than $10 million. The owner has to be a legal resident of Canada, and the business has to be a for-profit business. But the message that I'm really quite impressed with what they've done is that they were listening. They've been willing to provide, based on the strength of the business and their assessment of who is running that business, there is a vehicle for actually accessing funding. And just further to Candice's comment, I know my own first BMO, Bank of Montreal. further to Candice's comment, I know like my own First Nation, we signed a claim settlement a number of years ago, and my own community has set up an innovation fund essentially for new entrepreneurs. It's not a lot, but it's you can go on access up to maybe $4,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 from the band to invest towards the business. And the thing about this is that it's a lot of work, but if you put your mind in the space of the funder, quite often they're trying to manage risk. And if you can go in and say, well, here I've got a line of credit from this bank, and there's another bit of funding from this group over here, it actually decreases the risk on the part of the government person you're talking to, or the other bank, or the other funding agency. They call that leveraging, but if you can, it's almost the hardest thing is to get that first sort of amount of money in. And once you do, it makes it a little bit easier to go to the next place and ask for a bit more money, because somebody's already made that decision and has already assessed that risk. So that's just a strategy for you.
Great. I think I want to add, another route from non-dilutive funding that I found very useful to start our business and our organization was with the impact funding. There is now a lot of streaming about impact funding, and especially now with climate change and all the social issues that we are facing, investors are really taking care of this. So it's a little bit of still a very innovative and very new area of discovery for many investors. But how you can have, these, not-for-profit and for-profit entity working together. But it's when you can have access to other types of funding, like grants and awards and prizes, that also can provide you a little bit of liquid capital, especially at the beginning, and especially to start the developing of the initial stage of your product or your service. Basically, a little bit of how it works is, and I was talking about with several people during Collision, is how like you can incorporate a non-for-profit. That a non-for-profit is not necessarily a charity. Just remember, a non-for-profit is just an entity that doesn't share the equity to the stakeholders. Everything is invested back to the social purpose of the non-for-profit. But that doesn't mean that you are not going to hire people. That doesn't mean that you are not going to have expenses and contractors and other type of resources within the non-for-profit. But then you get eligible to a lot of other pockets of funding. And already Denis mentioned some of them already. Candice mentioned some of them. And also one very important part that we were very excited about, it was to partner with several universities across the country, because they are like looking forward to have community partners and to have companies and organizations that are working in the several social issues that they are trying to research about. So you can start getting access to different pockets of money, and also getting access to the resources of the universities and colleges that commonly they are very like significant, right? With the grants, for example, commonly non-for-profits are eligible for a higher percentage. For example, Canada Summer Jobs, very popular program from ESDC, like you can get a subsidy of 100% of the salary during the summer for for youth that are starting their careers. That has worked very well for us, and actually we have hired a lot of developers and UX designers during the summer that can help us in our programs. Of course, the challenges are to really trying to find a balance and trying to find the right advisors, because commonly you can find advisors on the non-for-profit sector, or you find advisors on the for-profit sector. So that is a little bit of the challenge that we found at the beginning. But I think it's a matter of understanding where you are going, what is the real purpose. And at the end of the day, I think one common thing that we have, all entrepreneurs, no matter if we are for-profit or not-for-profit, is that we want to create a positive impact in society. So, and I think, to just understanding the ecosystem can bring you a lot of different opportunities, and you can find really, really exciting ways of, launching your product, of launching your service. And also with this, also you are eligible, and Candice, maybe you can share more about the experience with MyTax, but also research grants. Research grants, especially, for example, if you're integrating anything regarding AI or any very, novel, in quotes, novel technology, you can have access to different pockets of money. You can create, a very diverse sources of funding for starting your business.
There's a lot of great information coming in here, and this is amazing. I'm thinking about this as a newbie and going, I'd probably be going, oh my God, but it's some great information that we're going to share the recording with afterwards, so you can go back and check it out. There's been a lot of information that has been added into the chat there. I threw a bunch of stuff in there, some of the main ones, but it's by no means exhaustive. One thing I just wanted to add as well too is that there's I think this was touched on, ask questions a lot, right? Just the ecosystem is here to help you, and everybody that I've known in the ecosystem is really helpful. So don't be afraid. Look at all the incubators, the accelerators out there. If you're not a member of IRAP already as well too, get in there early and just find an ITA. I think it's called an ITA I believe is the term for that. So you can you can have conversations with them. They'll help you. They'll start sending you things, so you'll start to see the things that are coming out. Check in with the schools and universities. I added a couple of links in there for BCIT. They have a $500 project where you can do a prototype with their students. CDM College, which has something starting up in January. They're Masters of Design, I believe. I might be not be doing that justice, but for Indigenous founders, they're waiving their $10,000 fee for successful projects, so you can apply there, and which is great early on. Northeastern University, if you can get something in by the 5th. There's 2 days. I shared a link down there, but you can, and that's just a few that I know of off the top of my head. If you look at all the schools and start developing relationships there, it's a really good way, especially early on. It can, and I wanted to preface that by saying you can also get lost in the funding sometimes too. So make sure you have a purpose for what you're trying to do. Look at what your outcome is, and then figure out what the things are that you can stack with that, opposed to just kind of jumping out and grabbing funding. Denis, I saw your hand. Also, before I jump off here, maybe I'll have probably one more question that I have time for, and then if anybody has any questions, throw it into the chat, and we can kind of see if there's any themes there for our final. I'll ask another one in a moment here, but Denis, you wanted to, so feel free to pop your questions into the chat. Let us know how we can help. Denis, you had something you wanted to add?
Sure, and I know a lot of the participants are from sort of Western Canada, but there are different parts of Canada where there are different programs, and some of them are quite unique. So we have an office in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and the only reason we have an office there is I went there on a business conference, and then I started talking to some people, and I got introduced to some folks at the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation, which is a provincial crown corporation whose mandate is to try and expand the economy in Northern Ontario. They have a number of programs. Some of them are targeted at Indigenous, and we fit into theirs because you probably don't realize this, but Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario is the headquarters for the Ontario Lottery Corporation, or Ontario Lottery and Gaming. And there are a number of technology companies that are in Sault Ste. Marie to try and support that business. So because what we do is testing is used quite a bit in gaming and different aspects of sort of corporate large systems. We kind of checked off a few boxes. So we submitted a business plan and sort of projections, pro forma financial statements, all those kinds of things, explained our business to the corporation. It went through their due diligence process, and we were approved for a sizable chunk of money. We were then, because they approved us, able to take that same basic proposal, submit it through FedNor, which is federal government economic development agency for Northern Ontario. So in Western Canada, we'd have Pacific Can or Prairies Can, COA in the Atlantic provinces, and they approved funding for us. And then on the basis of that, I was actually able to go in front of the city council for the city of Sault Ste. Marie and access an additional pot of funds that they had. The net of that whole effort was that for the first 4 years that we operated in Sault Ste. Marie, 50% of the dollars we spent on salary, not including benefits, was reimbursed by these various agencies. So what that did is created a really long runway for us. And developing technology talent, that runway is the biggest thing, because we're competing with the world in terms of the ability to deliver services. And you can't just go to one training course and be a senior resource. It takes years, right? So we have to have a way of being able to compete on rates and ensure that we're investing in people so that they can be competitive inside of that world league. So these are things that exist, and that they sometimes exist, but they're not really overly well communicated, or if they're communicated in kind of government language, which you have to be able to interpret. But if you're able to develop a relationship and get people to say, yeah, we see the value in this, the people on the funding side, they're looking for good news stories too, right? They're looking for the winner that helps them either with their career or helps them further the mandate, whatever it is. And if they like what you're saying and they see the value in your business, they'll help you. In many cases, they'll provide access to funding. Even if your business plan is weak, they can provide funding to help you hire a consultant to write a better business plan. Even accessing funding for like a fractional CFO or different professional services, sometimes legal fees, things like that. These programs do exist, and they exist across Canada. You just have to go and find them. But once you're able to break into that network, quite often the provincial people know the federal people, and they'll introduce you to them. And next thing you know, you've got a bigger discussion going on. And if your business is strong and you're able to sell the idea, sell the vision, people will make an effort to buy. And with that helps create that runway. Now, I have to, full disclosure, I'm not an entrepreneur. I came from a family of entrepreneurs, but was pretty risk averse for most of my life, and I worked in government, so I was that guy. And but I always had the question in the back of my mind, well, do I have what it takes to be successful in private industry? So just through a conversation at a business conference, I found a technology entrepreneur who had built a successful business, and we had an idea, which was the creation of this company that I now help to lead and build. And over the course of the last 9 years, I've learned the language. I've learned sort of the concepts. I learned how to negotiate, deals on sales, but deals on funding, and to communicate with different audiences. And for me, the growth has been, and if I have to go and start up a startup company next year or next week, I can do it. And part of that has been somebody who had already done it was willing to share his knowledge and his experience and his network of contacts to help me build my own. And there's a bit of message in there for I think everybody, and that's that there's a whole lot of knowledge. Everything you need to know to run a successful business already exists. You may not have it yet, but somebody's got it. And if you can, look to build your network and find people who are successful, and quite often, if you ask somebody for a little bit of advice or something, they'll give it to you. They'll give it to you for free, because that entrepreneurial spirit, I got to tell you, if that's who you are, you look at the world differently. I had to go from looking at the world through a risk-based lens, assessing what the risks are first, and then, ooh, that's risky. I don't know if I want to do that. The people that I work with now, they look at it and they say, there's always risk in everything. You manage the risk. You got to look at what's the opportunity and what's the payback period, and how do I manage that risk? And for me, that's been the biggest growth that I've ever experienced in my professional life. So just a bit of my story, but hopefully that helps some of you on your journey. Thank you.
It's amazing how many founders you talk to, and it's not like we start with a blueprint and have it all figured out. We're usually, I joke most of the time, but with a little bit of sincerity, that I'm unemployable, and so I've had to start my own ventures, and that's just how I learned. One of the things that you touched on there with a fractional CFO and financing, the other thing that's often available is business plan writing, because this all begins with having the material and knowing what you're, and being able to talk the language. So when you don't know the language, one of the best pieces of help you can get is for somebody to support you in creating that documentation, so that when you go to these different resources, you have the tools available to you, and there's often funding for that business plan writing. Which is, I kind of joke, in startup, business plans are for like bankers and fund and grant funders, and then you put them in a drawer and probably don't look at them, because your business changes so fast that it's not relevant in a week. So I think maybe, Candice, I know you got your hand up there, so maybe I'll ask you the next question and then have you add on to that as well too. One of the things I want to talk about is early on, it's sometimes, your company doesn't have a shelf life, it doesn't have a ton of resources in it. And so like, how does partnerships play into that in terms of academia, government, and not nonprofits that maybe do have that? Maybe there's groups that have grant writers and you can come to them with an idea and they can, you can be their vendor and, co-create some different funding or things like, some different proposals and things like that. So maybe just around the role of partnerships within that. And Candice, I know you had something else you wanted to add too.
No, absolutely. And it's funny because I was thinking about CSBFL's Canadian Small Business Financing Loans when I had my hand up. So I wanted, my rewind though is having the right attitude. You do not know who you are meeting and who is in some sort of position of power that can influence and support your business. Networking is important. When you go to business school, they drill it into you. Network. It really does matter when you see a proposal on the grant side and you know the passion behind that, the people, you're going to have a different approach and people are going to be willing to open their doors and help you. You're like, oh yeah, this is a great individual. I've seen the work they're doing. Those conversations are happening. It's not always just about numbers, particularly when it comes to the granting space. It's about impact, and oftentimes people are going to remember how you made them feel more than everything that you said in that moment, because things can be fixed. That support to increase the strength of your business proposal, that can be fixed, your business plan. I agree. It's usually just about getting the funding up front. So the Canadian Small Business Financing Loan, when I structured credit, anything over 50,000, I needed 2 years notice of assessment. So I wanted to know what your company's income was for the last 2 years. And I would want personal financials as well. So don't be afraid to side hustle in the beginning. A lot of people want to jump 2 feet in. There's nothing wrong with side hustling, because that income that you have that's secure, that can help get you your business loan. So think about that before you jump out with 2 feet and right into the entrepreneurship space and realize, oh, wait a minute, I no longer have any income and the bank doesn't want to look at me because I have no income. And I don't have 2 years notice of assessment for my business because I just started it up. So the Canadian Small Business Financing Loan is for startups, and it's the only financial vehicle for lending that we could use, where we could use future projections. So I would send clients, I'd go get a good business plan. If you have to hire an accountant to help you with the projections of your financials because you struggle with financials, do that. You still have to have a good credit score. You still need to have lots of other things in place. But the Canadian Small Business Financing Loan is a way to secure credit up to even 90% of funding to get that business started. And echoing what Denis said, the leveraging of funds and from the other side, grant side, we're looking at it, we're like, oh my gosh, this business has a diversified portfolio. They have funding from more than just one granting agency. They're looking at the national ecosystem and understanding how they can leverage industry dollars and not-for-profit dollars. A not-for-profit who has just started up today is eligible for grants from a certain number of existing funders. Not all. Some funders are going to want to see an organization that has 2 years of experience. And that's where in a strategic partnership with an organization that's been around for a while. I mean, most Indigenous people just want to uplift each other. They want to see other organizations succeed. So if you have a similar mandate to another organization that's willing to be able to accept funds and help your business get started, that could be another opportunity. So find those strategic alliances, increase your network, and don't be rude to anyone, because you might be surprised. That banker who maybe just declined your loan is working for you and hoping to get you approved next time, or maybe they know a granting agency that can support. Because I know I declined funding when I was a banker, and a year later I was approving even more for the same person because they listened to my advice, followed it, and were able to build their business and come back, and the numbers worked.
Amazing. I'm so into that. I'm going to get DM. But Bradley, thank you for keeping us on time. I'm so into this conversation. I'm not paying too much attention, but I do want to give a time warning here. I'm okay to go a little bit over if everyone else is, but I understand if you've got a hard stop, let me know. But just final thoughts and Denis or Alejandro, I know you had your hand up there, so do you want to lead off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to echo Candice on the type of partnerships. I had the good experience that at the beginning when we were just trying to get that initial capital to start hiring our first developers, one of the grantors didn't want to give us the money directly because we didn't have any experience. They were like, we want to see your previous experience, but hey, we were just incorporated. So it was a real challenge at the beginning trying to find that support system. But I think it was very important to start social networking and asking people for support. And we had a very, very good collaboration with, and I know that it's a non-Indigenous organization, but actually they were very open with us. They really wanted to commit it to reconciliation and working with Indigenous peoples. And they allow us to take the lead in the funding. YWCA Canada, and as a national organization, of course, they have a long history. And so they were like, Alejandro, we have a lot of things to do around reconciliation. And I think, if we can provide that support to your organization that is just starting. And we had a very, very good initial conversation, but basically they signed all the contracts. And the good part is that they gave us the money. They gave us the money. We have full control of the money. So it was not that they were like, filtering or administrating the funding. We got the hold of the entire chunk of money because they said, no, like you as an Indigenous organization, it needs to have the lead on how to spend the money and how to hire people. And so it was a very good partnership. Also, as another way to start building up your like organizational or your corporate CV to start presenting to others was partnering with, as I mentioned before, with universities around research funding. And they are always looking for having community partners, even if at the beginning they don't offer, a big chunk of money. The idea is that you can start placing that experience as part of your CV. That you can say, I already partnered with University of Calgary. I already partnered with York University, with the University of Toronto. I was part of this research that is very connected to what we do. So in that sense, people start knowing you and start knowing what is your organization, your company about. I think partnerships are a key component of the entrepreneurship journey. We wouldn't have been able to survive, especially when we have very limited resources at the beginning without the partnerships. And it is something that as the head of the organization, I'm always looking forward to continue the partnership journey. Sometimes you just meet people and you don't know how that conversation is going to go. I can tell you so many times that I sit down for half an hour and it's like, okay, this is not, I don't see how this is going. But after several conversations, I have got the best partnerships ever. Like, be patient in that partnership. It's not that it's going to be very straightforward, that you are going to sit down and after 10 minutes, you are going to know exactly how you want to partner. Sometimes requires a little bit of development. So, and actually, Ryan, that's how we met. Like, we started an initial conversation in this partnership has been like for more than 2 years, and we are continuing this partnership for a long period of time. So anyway, I think this is a little bit of being able and being open to, and also sometimes it's about being vulnerable, to share a little bit of the experiences that you are having. And hey, I'm just trying I'm having a discovery call with you. I just want to explore ideas with you. What do you think about? You're gonna learn a lot in those calls. And believe me, it's an investment. It's an investment in the long run. So, and you will find a lot of very interesting people when you are open to these type of opportunities.
Very funny. As you said, thank you, Alejandro. As you're saying that, I'm thinking like I have to say this is something that I've been guilty of in my younger career. I'm getting a little longer in the tooth now, but I used to go in like a bull in a china shop. partnerships, funders, I was expecting a check tomorrow, and there's a lot of relationship that goes into these things as well too, like just submitting like sure, submit things when you can, when you have to, but there's a lot of relationship that go into these things, and it takes time. And so when you think about like the conversations that you're having, like think about the steps, think about, like this is the first conversation, we're getting to know each other. And then maybe the next, like maybe that after that first conversation, it's like, hey, you know what, we're gonna like, let's set another meeting. Like this has gone really well, and I'd like to get to know more about your idea, or I'd like to learn more about what your fund or what your organization does. And then, maybe from that, it's like, okay, maybe we can ideate a little bit on some things after that next call if it goes well. So it's like, what are the steps that I'm going to need to do in order to make this work? And see if it does work, because it might be it's not a fit for you, or it's not a fit for them. And so it's all about that exploration and the relationship developing. And maybe something doesn't work today, but maybe in 6 months you think of something, or something else comes up, and you've already built that relationship. So it's a muscle that you can exercise. And so I also noticed a couple of other things in the chat here. One of them is leading. Like, I don't know about leading with I'm Indigenous led. I've seen that in pitch decks and things like that. And I think it's almost like better to be like, you know what, I've got a really solid idea. Here's all the amazing things. And by the way, we're also an Indigenous led organization. And I think you can choose how you decide to show up with that as well too. But I think what I've noticed is that it's been very, there's a lot of people that want to do the right thing, that want to support, that want to see equitable outcomes, and are willing to, to invest in that with people. And so if you have, those conversations, make sure you let people know that it's an Indigenous-led organization as well too. I'm maximizing the time we have left here. So Denis, maybe some final thoughts for you, and a little bit on partnership. Yeah.
Well, I noticed there's two comments here. One was about the Indigenous Growth Fund. We've sort of used it through the Capital Corporation that I mentioned. Our experience was actually pretty good. Their process was straightforward. I'm assuming it's similar everywhere you go. But there was a lot of what we've already talked about, sort of making sure that they understood our business before they actually made the approval. I saw another comment in here about sort of federal government wanting to purchase more services from Indigenous suppliers. We are seeing that 5% sort of threshold is being written into procurement contracts, which is a very positive thing. The thing to keep everyone needs to keep in mind, though, is that Government of Canada is the largest purchaser of goods and services in Canada. They're an organization that tends to like scale, and there are a whole bunch of certifications that are required. So we thought, we get our Indigenous certificate saying that we've got this ownership, we've got 33% Indigenous workforce, and then we'll qualify. Well, all of a sudden, no, you need TBIPs, you need CBIPs, you need secret clearance, you need controlled good services, and all of a sudden we're a year and a half later and we still don't have a direct contract with the Government of Canada. We have multiple contracts through other large, I guess we call them SIs, or systems integrators, like the IBMs and Deloittes and Accentures of the world. They're already doing business with the government, so we're doing subcontract work. That's a way in, but if you're a small IT services company, the government is the big fish, it's the big whale that everybody's hunting. It's just not an easy place to get in. Then it takes a bit of work. And we found that provincial governments are quicker quite often, and especially if you can demonstrate impact in the local economy as well. Certain sectors, so oil and gas, anytime you're pulling something out of the ground or transporting it across the ground, you're doing something on somebody's traditional territory. So all of those companies are kind of hardwired in. If they can find a way to generate impact back to communities, they're interested in it. Not everybody wants to do business with oil and gas. Some people have, don't like the idea of it. Some people don't like to do work with lottery and gaming. That's a decision that everyone has to make for their own company. But understanding the market, as we've mentioned, there are some companies that are more willing to do business with Indigenous businesses. The key is to finding out who they are and then figuring out what they want in terms of services for them. So I will stop there. It's been a fantastic afternoon. And thank you everyone for listening to me and to be a part of this.
And thank you for touching that as well too, on the, like, I did see that come in with the procurement. I think federally, provincially, municipally, and you know, like publicly traded or larger corporations all have mandates in place as well too. And I do think industry is probably the easiest to start with, or partnerships through the industry to access some of those other ones as well too. And I think that leads to one of the things I'd just like to add before we jump off is that you're going to have to hustle. There actually is no free money. And so, you know, especially if you don't have somebody willing to cut you that 10K or that 100K grant or in funding initially, and you don't have that like kind of seed money, you're going to have to, like, the best source of funding is always revenue. And that revenue will open up the doors for you to be able to access some of these funding. It's almost like fuel to the fire that just makes it like that much easier to gain. You know, you get a foothold in, you have some revenue, might not even be scalable initially, right? Like for your startup, it might be something that, you know, and so at Candice, you talked about doing as a side hustle. I do think that's a great way to start out initially as well too, so that you can kind of see where you can find some revenue, where you can get things going and go from there. But so many good things shared here. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. This has been an amazing panel. Alejandro, Candice, Denis, thank you for sharing your time and always being like, it's amazing. I'm so grateful to have you all in my network. Bradley, again, thank you for keeping me organized. And it's been a pleasure to be here with everybody. Thank you so much for your time. If you have questions, if you're not in the Slack channel, please email me, ryan@stgermain.ca, and I'll add you into the Slack channel there. So again, let me throw it into the, and this will be a starting point. So a lot of this information will get curated. We will send it out, and we'll also start having connections within industry. And I should say one final, Angie, as I looked at you, Angie's on the call here from New Ventures BC. I'd be remiss if I didn't say there's also IP grants out there. There are a lot of IP grants. So there's a lot of accelerators in town that are facilitating those grants. New Ventures BC is the one in British Columbia. And so check those out as well. And with my final plug, I will bid you all adieu. Thank you so much for joining today. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, everyone.